were signs, but I truly thought for the first time in my life, I worked so hard at something, I was so good at something, everybody acknowledged that I was, that they couldn't fire me, that they wouldn't fire me. Even in trying to adjust to be at least more of what certain people wanted, they still fired me. Gotten some heads up. I mean, summer ago, Stephen A sat with me, took me to lunch in Los Angeles. And he told me, he said, you know, there's a particular executive that doesn't like you. Now, let me be honest. I had been hearing this for years, right? It had gotten to me so many times. And so having that dinner or that lunch with Stephen A was just confirmation of it. He's like, you need to go set a meeting. But so many times, and this kid, you know, from the West Bank is like so accepted in New Orleans now. Like, I wouldn't change that, you know, never. You know, like, all I ever wanted to do was be accepted, you know, and want it. So yeah, like that.
When Ryan Clark, Channing Crowder, and Fred Taylor sat down for a new episode of the Pivot podcast, there was really only one topic on everyone's mind. What actually happened to Ryan Clark last Monday? That was the day a clip of him being let go from ESPN's NFL Live spread across the internet in real time. Viewers watched him go to a commercial break and never come back. By the time the show returned, word was already circulating that Clark had been fired. Naturally, that raised a lot of questions. What people didn't always understand was exactly what made the moment go viral in the first place. It wasn't just the firing, it was watching it unfold live, on camera, without warning. I'd already covered this story once before, and when I did, I caught some backlash, specifically for commenting on the moment in the interview where Clark got emotional. That interview, by the way, wasn't on ESPN, it was on their own show, The Pivot, and these three guys have built something genuinely successful. That's not in question. Some of the pushback I got was minor, the kind of thing you brush off, but enough of it missed the actual point I was making that I think it's worth laying out in full. Let's start here. I don't think Clark should have brought Stephen A. Smith's name into this the way he did. In the interview, Clark suggested that a certain ESPN executive didn't like him, and in doing so, he pulled Stephen A. Smith directly into the story. I touched on this briefly during a live stream where I had more room to unpack it, but I didn't go too deep into it in my original video, mainly because I didn't want to be overly critical of Clark right out of the gate. During the stream, though, since I know fewer people catch those, I spent more time really breaking it down. And my take was this: he shouldn't have said that. By bringing it up, he was essentially telling ESPN's executives that Stephen A. Smith had been politicking on his behalf, when really Smith had been looking out for him. By Clark's own account, Smith had his back. He said that when he was having issues with the network before, Smith reached out and offered him a 2-day slot on First Take talking football if things went sideways. That's someone giving you a landing spot before you even need one. And in return, Clark went public and put him in the middle of a controversy about a difficult executive relationship. It's also worth remembering where Stephen A. Smith stands. He's under contract with ESPN, and he's been upfront, publicly and repeatedly, that he shows up, does the job, and works to make the company money. Say what you want about the things he's said on that platform over the years, and there's plenty to disagree with, but in this specific situation, he was trying to help Clark. He didn't deserve to be dragged into it. Now, on the crying, because I know that's the part that got people fired up. Some will argue Clark wasn't crying about losing the job, or about ESPN specifically, but realistically that's how it read, no matter how you frame it, because the entire segment existed as a direct response to being fired. The interview itself was built around that moment. And in that same conversation, Clark used language suggesting the network had deliberately broken him down in public, made an example out of him specifically because he's a black man, to prove they could get that kind of reaction out of him. And here's the thing, he had to have known that going in. I've been a full-time creator for 8 years. I've recorded hundreds of interviews and thousands of live streams every single day since 2018, and you can look that up. So I understand this part of the business intimately. The moment you hit record, you're choosing what the world gets to see, whether to put it out or leave it on the cutting room floor. If you choose to show yourself breaking down on camera, you're also handing that moment to anyone who wanted to see you look weak. If people were hoping to make an example out of him, to make him look emasculated, to make him fold, showing that moment gave them exactly what they wanted. None of this erases what Clark accomplished. He spent 11 years at ESPN after wrapping up a 13-year NFL career. That's a long, successful run by any measure, and it didn't happen by accident. He's been genuinely blessed in this business, and to be fair to him, it doesn't sound like ESPN handled this cleanly or respectfully. If there's truth to how he described the situation, that's a legitimate criticism of the network, and we can say plainly, that was foul, that was cutthroat. But it's also worth remembering what Clark himself acknowledged. ESPN is a private company. He worked for them, not the other way around. They set the rules, they approve the scripts, and ultimately, they decide who stays and who goes. Maybe there are a few bad actors involved, but at the end of the day, if leadership holds the power, that's who makes the call. You can criticize that decision publicly, you can push back in the media, you can call it out all you want, but they hold the authority, and no amount of criticism changes who's making the final decision. Showing that kind of vulnerability in front of the world only lets them feel like they've won, like they've proven they had the final say. Was there a deliberate effort to push him out? Possibly, even likely. But there's another factor that can't be ignored: the business side and the numbers. Let's be honest about that too. If Clark had been pulling in undeniable must-watch ratings, it's fair to assume he'd probably still be on the air. That's not a knock on his talent as an analyst, that part is subjective. He could be one of the best in the business and still get let go if the numbers or the internal politics don't line up in his favor. To be clear, I'm not saying he wasn't putting up good numbers, wasn't productive, or didn't deserve his position. But it seems ESPN reached a point where they decided the tension wasn't worth it, that they weren't comfortable with how often he spoke on issues facing the black community, that he'd been warned about certain takes, and that some people internally simply weren't fans of his approach. And in a business built around ratings, if leadership decides someone isn't moving the needle enough to outweigh that friction, they'll treat that person as replaceable. In a corporation, everyone is replaceable. That's not me tearing down what Clark built. That's just the reality of how these companies operate, and it's worth saying plainly instead of softening it. Here's where I think the real opportunity got missed, and yes, I'll say it, that part was weak. The Pivot podcast is already a hit. Clark, Crowder, and Taylor have built something that functions like their own version of ESPN. If a team with that much talent and that much of an audience can't turn a public firing into fuel, that's the disappointing part. Imagine if instead of an emotional sit-down, Clark had responded by immediately launching his own solo channel. A short initial statement, then, "I just started my own channel. Come check it out. This is Ryan Clark Speaks," or whatever he wanted to call it. He could have picked up hundreds of thousands of subscribers within a week, maybe more. That kind of attention is nearly impossible to buy, and ESPN handed it to him for free. Instead of letting the firing be a setback, he could have worked it, turned it into momentum. Getting let go publicly, however it happened, came with built-in marketing most people never get.
And Clark isn't starting from zero. He already has a recognizable name in this business. He has familiarity with the audience. He already has another platform to fall back on. By his own account, he's earned around $2 million a year in media, meaning the financial cushion is already there. On top of all of that, he has something 99.9% of people who lose a job simply don't have: a contact list full of multi-million-dollar relationships built with other successful people across the industry over more than a decade. Given all of that, there's little reason for this to have felt like a devastating loss. He's put in the work, he didn't get here by accident, so the emotional reaction, the moment that came off like he'd lost everything, isn't something I can just let slide without comment. He made the choice to record it and put it out into the world, which means on some level, he wanted people to see that moment, to see it as him being broken down. I don't agree with framing it that way, and that's really the only reason I spoke on this at all, since people have been bringing it to me directly. This was never meant as a personal attack on Ryan Clark.